Ukraine is also seeking to deprive men of military age of consular services in Europe, using this as leverage to bring back its citizens.
Welcome back, everyone, to the deep dive. This time, we're taking a closer look at something really complex and deeply human.
Yeah,
It's the exodus of people from Ukraine.
right.
We've got reports, news articles, even firsthand accounts
Yeah,
to try and understand why this is happening
right.
and, what it all means for Ukraine's future.
Well, it really is a situation that goes beyond just numbers. We're talking about individual lives and families
Yeah,
and how war just ripples through a society
absolutely.
and the incredibly difficult choices that people are facing every single day.
Yeah, and it gets even more complicated
Yeah.
when you realize we're dealing with two distinct exoduses happening at the same time.
Right.
Refugees fleeing the country,
Uh-huh.
but also military desertions from within the ranks.
Exactly.
And both obviously stem from the war, but they have really different causes
Yeah.
and different consequences that I think we need to sort of unpack separately. So maybe we could start with the refugee crisis.
Sure.
I mean, the estimates are,
6 to 10 million
wow,
Ukrainians are living abroad right now.
6 to 10 million.
That's a huge chunk of their population.
Yeah, that's huge.
To put it in perspective, think if like a quarter of the U.S. population
Wow.
suddenly had to relocate.
Yeah, that's a crazy scale.
Yeah,
What I found really surprising, though,
Mhm.
is the Ukrainian government's stance on this.
right.
They're actually pushing the EU to reduce aid
Yeah,
to Ukrainian refugees.
right.
Why would they do that?
Well, I mean, it seems counterintuitive at first,
Yeah.
but it's all tied to this demographic crisis that Ukraine's facing.
Okay.
They're already experiencing this population decline, and they see the return of refugees as like
Right.
essential for rebuilding.
So they're trying to strike this balance, like, between supporting their citizens who are abroad,
Right.
but also encouraging them to come back.
Exactly.
So it's like the less comfortable things are for Ukrainians abroad, the more likely they are to just come back and help rebuild.
That's the theory, at
Yeah,
least.
that's the theory.
But there is some pushback against this approach.
Yeah, I bet. I mean, it makes sense to me.
Sociologists and migration experts are saying, no,
Right.
security concerns have to be addressed first.
Of course. Yeah.
It's one thing to want people to come back,
Right.
but you have to make it possible for them to come back
Right.
safely.
Well, and we're still talking about, daily bombings in a lot of the country.
That's right.
It's kind of like saying come home, but the house is still on fire.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Plus, you have these concerns about economic hardship for anyone who goes back.
Yeah.
What kind of job market will they be coming back to?
Right.
And then there's just this lack of a clear government plan
Yeah.
for reintegration.
It's just all these unknowns.
Yeah, and one sociologist even said, nobody knows how this will be done.
Oh, wow. So even the experts are kind of unsure.
Yeah, there's a lot of uncertainty.
And that must weigh on people. Like,
Yeah,
there's
probably.
families that have had their lives, completely uprooted, put on hold.
Right.
And even if they want to go back, and the sources say that 61% of refugees do hope to return,
Wow,
Yeah.
that's a lot.
it's not a simple decision.
Wow.
They have to weigh, their safety, their economic prospects, the future of their kids.
Yeah.
It's a lot.
And, their ties to Ukraine are strong, obviously.
Yeah.
But the longer they're away,
Mm-hmm.
the more those ties might weaken.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
Kids start school in new countries.
Yeah.
Adults, find jobs, build lives elsewhere.
Build new lives.
It's a very complex situation.
Yeah.
No easy answers.
And then you layer on top of that
Right.
the military desertion crisis that's happening simultaneously.
That's where the potential for real security issues come in.
Yeah.
The estimates are that up to 200,000 soldiers could have deserted by November 2024.
200,000. That's a huge.
That's a lot of people.
Yeah. What's driving that kind of exodus? Is it just fear of combat or?
It's more nuanced than that.
Okay.
A big factor is inadequate training.
Okay.
A lot of soldiers are being thrown into battle with very little preparation,
Oh, wow.
which is terrifying and demoralizing.
Yeah.
One soldier even described being sent to the front lines before finishing basic training.
Oh, my gosh.
He said, "We were not given the opportunity to complete the course, and because of the fact that people are leaving the village deserting, We were sent to the battle zone earlier than planned.
So they're going into these incredibly dangerous situations without the skills or the knowledge to
Sure.
even survive.
And it's a recipe for disaster.
Yeah.
And if that wasn't bad enough, you also have these accounts of, really unethical orders being given.
Right.
Soldiers being pressured to commit acts they find morally reprehensible,
Oh, wow.
like targeting civilians.
Targeting civilians.
One soldier even reported, the command ordered us not to speak Ukrainian if we came across civilians and kill them on sight.
That's horrifying. I mean,
Yeah.
to be put in a position where you have to betray your own people, your own language. I mean,
It's a moral crisis on top of everything else.
it really is.
And when you combine that with inadequate training
Yeah,
and this constant fear,
of course.
it's no wonder
Yeah.
that so many are choosing to desert.
Okay, so we've got millions of refugees fleeing for their lives
Right.
and thousands of soldiers abandoning their posts.
Yeah.
And both of these situations seem to be driven, at least in part, by this sense of betrayal and this lack of support from their government.
Mm-hmm.
But where does that leave Ukraine's defense capabilities? I mean, if this continues,
Right.
can they realistically hold the line?
That's the question, isn't it?
Yeah.
The situation's dire.
Yeah.
There's no sugarcoating it.
I mean, are we talking about potential collapse of the Ukrainian defense?
It's definitely a possibility we have to consider.
Because, I mean, that has huge implications, not just for Ukraine, but for the entire region.
Absolutely. And it gets more complicated when you factor in their reliance on U.S. aid.
Oh, right.
Some analysts are predicting that could falter.
Yeah.
And if that happens, things could deteriorate pretty rapidly.
Yeah.
We could be looking at a much larger refugee crisis
Yeah.
spilling across Europe.
Okay, so we've got these immediate crises, right? People fleeing,
Right.
soldiers deserting.
Yeah,
But then we have these long-term consequences, too.
exactly.
Where do we even begin to unpack that?
Well, one of the most obvious places to start is the economic impact.
Okay.
Rebuilding Ukraine after this war.
Yeah.
It's going to be a monumental task.
It's gotta be.
Estimates are suggesting it could cost upwards of $411 billion,
$411 billion.
which is more than their entire pre-war GDP.
That's mind-boggling.
And a shrinking workforce,
Yeah.
whether through refugees or desertions,
Yeah. Yeah.
just makes that rebuilding effort even harder.
Yeah. That's a vicious cycle. War causes economic hardship,
Yeah,
which drives people away,
right.
which further damages the economy.
Exactly.
And it's not just about the numbers. You know, we're
Mhm.
talking about skilled workers, entrepreneurs, young people
Yeah,
who are the future of their industries.
that's right.
I mean, think about all the doctors and engineers,
Yeah.
teachers.
It's a huge loss of human capital.
And then there's the social and cultural impact to think about.
Of course.
Millions of Ukrainians are scattered across the globe. They're
Mhm.
creating these new diaspora communities,
Yeah?
pockets of Ukrainian culture in these foreign lands.
What does that mean for Ukrainian identity in the long run?
I mean, will it lead to a dilution of Ukrainian culture
Yeah.
as people assimilate?
Yeah,
Or will it strengthen it,
right.
by fostering these global networks?
It's hard to predict.
Yeah.
We could see this resurgence of Ukrainian pride
Yeah.
and nationalism
Uh-huh.
in response to this shared experience of displacement.
Yeah, I could see that.
Or, we could see a fragmentation of Ukrainian identity
Okay.
as these communities evolve in different directions.
It's almost like this forced migration is a giant social experiment.
It really is.
And the results are going to have major implications
Yeah.
for Ukraine's future.
And then you layer on top of all that
Yeah.
the political dimension.
Yeah, of course.
How does this exodus, both of refugees and deserters,
Yeah.
affect the government's stability?
Yeah, their ability to actually govern.
That's crucial.
Because even if the war ended tomorrow, they would still be facing this massive challenge
Yeah.
of reintegration, of rebuilding trust.
And we are seeing a growing disillusionment among the population,
Yeah.
a sense that the government isn't doing enough
Of course. Of
to
course.
support those who are suffering.
Right, right. So there's potential for instability there, too,
Absolutely.
as returning refugees and veterans come back with their own experiences, their
Yeah.
own demands.
It could reshape the political landscape
Yeah,
in unpredictable ways.
it's not just about rebuilding the physical infrastructure.
No.
It's about rebuilding trust,
Right.
addressing trauma,
Yeah.
creating a future that people actually believe in.
And all of this is happening against the backdrop of this ongoing war,
Right.
which adds another layer of uncertainty.
Of course. Yeah.
Will the conflict escalate,
Right.
leading to even greater displacement?
Right.
Or will we see some kind of negotiated settlement?
Yeah.
That paves the way for reconstruction and reconciliation.
It feels like we're at a crossroads
We are.
with so many potential paths ahead.
And the choices that are made now, both by the Ukrainian government and the international community,
Yeah.
are going to have huge consequences for years to come.
It really does feel like a turning point.
It is.
What do you think are the key takeaways from all of this? What should our listener be thinking about?
Now, I think it's easy to get overwhelmed by the scale of the challenges,
Right.
but we have to remember these are real people's lives,
Absolutely.
and their stories deserve to be heard and understood.
One of the things that really struck me as we were going through all of this is that this exodus from Ukraine, it's not just about numbers, it's not just about statistics.
No.
It's so much more complex.
It is.
And it has consequences that we're only beginning to understand.
And those consequences go far beyond Ukraine's borders.
Exactly.
We're talking about potential ripple effects across Europe and even globally.
So it's about staying informed
Yeah.
and staying engaged.
Right.
We can't turn away from this.
No, we can't afford to.
So what can our listeners do?
Well, the first step is, acknowledge the complexity.
Yeah.
There are no easy answers here.
Right.
And then it's about educating ourselves.
Yeah.
Seeking out diverse perspectives.
Okay.
Engaging in thoughtful dialogue.
One thing that I was thinking about, and maybe you can tell me if this is crazy,
Sure.
but this diaspora, it has the potential to really reshape Ukraine's relationship with the rest of the world.
That's an interesting thought.
It wasn't really explicitly stated in any of the articles we read, but it feels like a significant possibility.
It does.
I mean, you have millions of Ukrainians living all over the globe now.
Right.
Forming new connections,
Yeah.
sharing their culture,
Yeah.
advocating for their homeland in ways that we haven't seen before.
Right.
It's almost like this forced migration is creating
Yeah.
this global network of ambassadors for Ukraine,
It really is.
raising awareness, building empathy
Yeah.
in a way that, traditional diplomacy might not be able to.
Exactly.
It'll be really fascinating to see how that dynamic plays out.
It will.
Will they become a force for positive change,
Yeah.
both within Ukraine and on the international stage?
It's certainly a possibility.
It really speaks to the resilience of people,
It does.
the ability to adapt
Yeah.
and find strength even in the face of, unimaginable hardship.
As we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave our listener with one final thought.
Okay.
Well, the focus is often on the immediate crisis,
Yeah.
the short-term solutions.
Yeah.
We need to think about the long game.
The long game. Yeah. What does that look like?
How can we, as a global community,
Yeah.
support Ukraine's recovery
Right.
in a way that's sustainable
Yeah.
and equitable
Okay.
and truly empowers the Ukrainian people?
To rebuild their lives
Yes.
and their nation.
It's a powerful question.
It really is.
And it's going to require a lot of soul-searching
Let's hear it.
collaboration and a real commitment to justice
Right.
and human dignity.
It's about going beyond the headlines
Absolutely.
and recognizing the shared humanity that connects us all.
Beautifully put.
So, listener, we hope this deep dive has given you
A new perspective.
a new perspective on the exodus from Ukraine.
A deeper understanding of how complex it all is.
And maybe even inspired you to keep learning.
Keep asking questions.
Keep asking questions and keep searching for those deeper truths.
Because ultimately, that's what it's all about.
The more we understand,
Yeah.
the better equipped we are to act.
To act with compassion, with empathy,
Yeah.
and a genuine desire to make a difference.
Until next time.
Keep diving deep. It is, the situation's dire. There's no sugarcoating it.
Yeah.
These mass desertions are really weakening their ability to maintain a strong defense.
So, what does that mean in practical terms? Are we talking about, a potential collapse of Ukraine's defense? Because that has huge implications, not just for Ukraine, but for the entire region.
It's a possibility we have to consider, and it gets even more complicated.
Right.
When you think about their reliance on U.S. aid,
Oh, right. Yeah.
some analysts are predicting that could falter.
Right.
And if that happens, things could
Yeah.
deteriorate pretty rapidly.
Wow.
We could be looking at a much larger refugee crisis spilling across Europe.
So we've got these immediate crises,
Yeah.
right? People fleeing, soldiers deserting. But then we also have to think about the long-term consequences
The long
of all
term.
this. Where do we even begin to unpack that?
Well, I think one of the most obvious places to start is the economic impact.
Okay.
Rebuilding Ukraine after this war is going to be just a monumental task.
Yeah, it's gotta be.
Estimates suggest it could cost upwards of $411 billion,
$411 billion.
which is more than their entire pre-war GDP.
That's mind-boggling.
And a shrinking workforce.
Yeah.
Whether it's through refugee outflow or military desertions, just makes that rebuilding even harder.
Yeah, it's a vicious cycle.
It is.
The war causes economic hardship, which drives people away, which further damages the economy.
Right, exactly.
It just keeps feeding back on itself.
And it's not just about the numbers either.
Right.
You know, we're talking about skilled workers, entrepreneurs, young people.
Right.
Who would have been the future of their industries.
Yeah, like all the doctors and engineers.
Yeah, teachers.
Teachers. I mean, that's just
a huge loss of human capital.
It is.
Yeah.
And then there's the social and cultural impact.
Of course.
To think about, millions of Ukrainians are now scattered across the globe. They're creating these new diaspora communities.
Right.
Pockets of Ukrainian culture in these foreign lands.
What does that mean for Ukrainian identity in the long run?
Yeah, what does that mean? Will it lead to a dilution of Ukrainian culture as people assimilate?
Right.
Or will it strengthen it by fostering these global networks?
It's so hard to predict.
It really is.
We could see a resurgence of Ukrainian pride and nationalism in response to this shared experience of displacement.
Yeah, I could see that.
Or we could see a fragmentation of Ukrainian identity as these communities kind of evolve in different directions.
It's almost like this forced migration is a giant social experiment.
It really is, yeah.
And the results are going to have major implications for Ukraine's future.
Absolutely. And then you layer on top of that.
Yeah, right, of course.
The political dimension.
The political dimension, yeah.
How does this exodus of both refugees and deserters affect the government's ability to govern? Like, how stable is the government going to be?
Yeah, that's crucial. Because even if the war ended tomorrow,
right, exactly,
they'd still be facing this massive challenge
of reintegration, rebuilding trust.
Yeah.
And we are seeing growing disillusionment with the government.
Yeah.
A sense that they're not doing enough.
Of course.
To support people who are suffering.
So there's potential for instability there, too.
Absolutely.
As returning refugees and veterans come back with their own experiences.
Their own demands.
Right, and their own expectations.
It could reshape the political landscape in really unpredictable ways.
It's not just about rebuilding the physical infrastructure.
No, it's not.
It's about rebuilding trust, addressing trauma, creating a future that people actually believe in.
Yeah, and all of this is happening with this ongoing war.
Right.
Which just adds another layer of uncertainty.
Of course.
Will it escalate?
Right.
Lead to even greater displacement?
Right.
Or will we see some kind of negotiated settlement?
Right.
That paves the way for reconstruction and reconciliation?
It feels like we're at a crossroads.
We are.
With so many potential paths ahead.
And the choices that are made now, both by the Ukrainian government and the international community, are going to have huge consequences for years to come.
It really does feel like a turning point.
It is.
What do you think are the key takeaways from all this? What should our listener be thinking about as they process all this information?
It is, yeah. It's a lot to process. It's easy to get overwhelmed by all the challenges.
It is, yeah.
But you're right. We have to remember these are real people. And these are their lives and their stories, and we have to understand them.
I think that's one of the big takeaways here. This exodus from Ukraine, it's not just about numbers and statistics.
It really isn't. It's so complex.
Yeah.
And it has consequences that I think we're just starting to grasp.
And those consequences go far beyond Ukraine's borders, too, right?
Absolutely. They do.
We're talking about Europe. We're talking about potential global effects.
And it's why we have to stay informed.
Yeah.
It's why we have to stay engaged.
Yeah.
This isn't something we can turn away from.
So what can our listeners do? How can they, make sense of all this and maybe even help?
Well, I think the first step is acknowledging the complexity.
Okay.
There are no easy answers here.
Right.
And then it's about educating ourselves.
Yeah.
Seeking out different perspectives, having thoughtful conversations.
One thing that really struck me as we were reading through all this is the potential for this diaspora to really reshape Ukraine's relationship with the rest of the world.
It's interesting.
I mean, it wasn't explicitly said in any of the articles, but it feels like such a significant possibility.
It does, yeah. Millions of Ukrainians living all over the globe now.
They are.
Forming these connections.
Yeah.
Sharing their culture, advocating for their homeland in ways that we haven't seen before.
It's unprecedented.
It's almost like this forced migration is creating this global network of ambassadors for Ukraine.
It really is.
Raising awareness, building empathy in ways that traditional diplomacy can't always do.
I think so, yeah.
It'll be fascinating to watch how that dynamic unfolds.
Absolutely.
Will this diaspora become a real force for positive change?
It's a huge possibility.
Both within Ukraine and on the world stage.
For sure. It really speaks to that human resilience too, doesn't it?
It does.
Like the ability to adapt
and
find strength in just unimaginable circumstances.
As we wrap up, I want to leave our listeners with one final thought.
Okay.
We're talking about the immediate crisis a lot.
Yeah.
We're talking about short-term solutions.
Of course.
But we also need to think long-term. The long game, yeah.
What does that look like?
How can we, as a global community, help Ukraine recover
Right.
in a way that's sustainable, equitable, and really empowers Ukrainians to rebuild their lives?
To rebuild their nation.
Exactly. It's a big question.
It really is.
It's going to require a lot of reflection, collaboration, and a true commitment to justice and human dignity.
It's about going beyond the headlines.
It is.
And recognizing the things that connect us all.
That's it, yeah. Beautifully said.
We hope this deep dive has given our listeners
a new perspective.
A new perspective on the exodus from Ukraine.
A deeper understanding of just how complex it all is.
And maybe even inspired you to keep learning and keep asking those questions.
Keep asking those tough questions and keep searching for those deeper truths.
Because that's what this is all about.
It is.
The more we understand, the better equipped we are to act.
To act with compassion and empathy.
Yeah.
And a real desire to make a difference in the world.
Until next time.
Keep diving deep.